It was early spring in Portland, Oregon, the kind of morning where the air felt crisp and the sky promised a new beginning. Olivia Parker stood by the school bus, clipboard in hand, watching her group of college writing students load their backpacks for the annual literature field excursion. She'd organized dozens of these trips in her 10 years of teaching, but something about this one felt different. Maybe it was the weather. Maybe it was her own restlessness. Or maybe it was because of one particular student, Ethan Miller. Ethan was 20, quiet but confident, with that thoughtful presence that always drew attention without trying. His essays had depth far beyond his age. He didn't just write about books. He felt them. And Olivia, who was 34, admired that in him. Over the past semester, she'd noticed how he stayed after class, asking questions that went beyond grammar or structure, questions about meaning, choices, and life. There was always sincerity in his eyes when he spoke to her, and though she never allowed herself to think too much about it, she couldn't deny the comfort of those brief conversations. The students gathered, their voices buzzing with excitement as the bus pulled out of the parking lot. The destination was Clearwater Ridge, a scenic nature reserve where they'd hike, read poetry aloud, and reflect on storytelling. Olivia took her usual seat near the front, but soon Ethan moved quietly into the empty spot beside her. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked with an easy smile. "Of course not," she replied. Pretending to focus on her notes, he glanced at her papers, noticing her neat handwriting. "You still write by hand?" "Always," she said. "It helps me think." "I do that too," he admitted. "I feel like the pen tells the truth more than the keyboard does." She looked at him, surprised. "That's something I'd expect an old writer to say." He grinned. "Maybe I'm one at heart." Their conversation drifted naturally from books to favorite places, to childhood memories. And before Olivia realized it, an hour had passed. There was something calm about Ethan's presence, steady, patient, and it reminded her of a time when she'd been young, full of hope. Before life became routine, the bus arrived at Clearwater Ridge around noon. The group unpacked near the lake, surrounded by tall pine trees and soft sunlight filtering through the branches. Olivia led them in reading sessions by the water, where students shared poems inspired by nature. When Ethan read his piece, the air seemed to grow still. His words spoke of silence, of people carrying stories inside them they were too afraid to tell. There was something personal about it, something that felt almost directed at her, though she knew it couldn't be. When he finished, the class applauded, but Olivia just sat there quietly. Moved. After the session, while the others hiked ahead, Ethan stayed behind, helping her gather supplies. "That was a beautiful reading," she told him. "Thanks," he said, slipping his hands into his jacket pockets. "It's funny, though. I didn't write it for class." "Oh, then who did you write it for?" she asked, smiling curiously. He hesitated before answering. "For someone who reminds me what real connection feels like." Olivia froze for a moment. It was such a simple sentence, yet it carried weight, the kind of weight she didn't want to unpack. She laughed softly to break the tension. "That's a rare thing to say these days." "Maybe," he said, "but some things are worth saying out loud." They started walking up the trail together, the soft wind carrying the smell of pine. Students' laughter echoed ahead, but the distance between Olivia and Ethan made it feel like they were in another world. The climb wasn't steep, but her heart raced for reasons that had nothing to do with the hill. When they reached the ridge, the view stretched endlessly, green forests rolling beneath a bright blue sky. Olivia sat on a fallen log, pulling out her notebook. Ethan stood beside her, gazing at the horizon. "Do you ever miss being a student?" he asked suddenly. She looked up, thoughtful. "Sometimes. Back then, I thought everything was possible. Life felt full of doors I could open now." She trailed off. "Now it feels like you're standing in the hallway, staring at the ones you didn't open," he finished gently. She blinked, startled by how accurately he'd described what she often felt but never said aloud. "Yes," she whispered. "Exactly that." Ethan turned to her, his expression serious. "You could still open them, you know. It's not too late." Olivia tried to smile, but the emotion behind his words hit too close. She didn't reply. Instead, she looked back at the view, letting the silence stretch between them. By evening, they had reached the cabins near the base of the ridge. The group settled in and a campfire was built. The orange glow flickered on their faces as laughter filled the air. Olivia sat with her cup of tea, trying to keep her focus on her students' stories. But her mind kept drifting to Ethan's words, his poem, his quiet certainty when it was his turn to speak. Ethan began a story about a teacher who once told him that words could change the world. The others listened, but Olivia felt like he was talking directly to her. Every sentence carried warmth, gratitude, again, something deeper that she couldn't name. After the fire burned low, the students drifted off to their cabins, leaving only the soft hum of the forest. Olivia lingered for a moment, staring at the glowing embers. She didn't hear Ethan approach until he was beside her. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "Yes," she said, forcing a smile. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About how strange it is that some moments feel bigger than they should." He nodded, sitting beside her. "Maybe that's how you know they matter." They sat there in silence, listening to the crackle of the fire. For a brief second, she almost forgot who they were, teacher and student, and just felt the rare stillness of being understood. It wasn't romantic in the ordinary sense. It was emotional, like finding a piece of yourself in someone else's words. When the fire finally died down, she stood and brushed the ashes from her coat. "We should head back," she said softly. "Yeah," Ethan agreed, standing with her. "But Ms. Parker." She turned. "Thank you," he said, "for today. I think I'll remember it for a long time." Olivia didn't reply. She just smiled, her heart strangely heavy. That night, she couldn't sleep. The forest was quiet, but her thoughts weren't. She thought about the way Ethan listened, the way he spoke, and the way he looked at the world with unfiltered hope. Somewhere deep down, she realized that she wasn't just teaching him. He was reminding her of something she'd lost as she stared out the cabin window, the moonlight spilling across her desk. She opened her notebook and wrote just one line. "Sometimes the stories that move us most aren't the ones we write, but the ones we live through unexpected people." She didn't know it yet, but that weekend would leave a mark on her life, one she'd carry for years. And it all began with a quiet student who had the courage to say the things she'd long forgotten to believe. Morning came quietly at Clearwater Ridge. The forest was covered in a light mist, and the smell of wet pine filled the air. Olivia woke early, long before the students stirred. She sat on the porch of her cabin with a cup of coffee, watching the fog move through the trees like a living thing. The events of the previous day played through her mind, Ethan's poem, his words at the fire. The feeling that something inside her had quietly shifted. It had been years since she'd felt that alive, that scene. But she reminded herself that Ethan was her student and nothing could cross that line. She had built her life on structure, grades, lectures, deadlines, and she wasn't about to let feelings, however fleeting, undo all that. Still, his voice kept echoing in her head. You could still open them? By the time the students began stirring, Olivia had composed herself. She called everyone to breakfast and reminded them about the day's hike to the waterfall trail. Ethan arrived last, sleepy but smiling, carrying his notebook. When their eyes met, Olivia gave a polite nod, professional, distant. She hoped that would draw the line again. But as the day unfolded, fate had other plans. The hike to the falls was longer than expected. The group followed a narrow path that wound through dense forest, sunlight dripping through the leaves. The students chatted, took pictures, and occasionally stopped to rest. Olivia walked near the back, keeping an eye on everyone. Ethan, as usual, stayed a few steps behind the others, occasionally sketching or jotting notes in his journal. At one point, a student twisted her ankle on a loose stone, forcing the group to stop. While a few helped her back to the trail entrance, Olivia decided to stay behind with Ethan and two others to rest near a clearing. The others soon rejoined the main group, leaving only Olivia and Ethan near the stream. They sat on opposite rocks, the sound of water rushing softly between them. For a while, neither spoke. Then Ethan broke the silence. "You ever feel like life put you in the wrong story?" Olivia glanced at him, curious. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, tossing a pebble into the stream. You're doing everything right, everything you're supposed to do, but it still feels like it's not your story, like you're reading from someone else's book." Olivia smiled faintly. "You sound like one of your essays." He laughed, then turned serious again. "I just think people give up too early. They stop chasing what they actually want." "Maybe because they think it's too late," she said softly. "Do you think it's ever too late?" he asked. She met his eyes and hesitated. "Sometimes, especially when what you want doesn't fit the life you already have." Ethan didn't look away. "Then maybe it's time to change the life, not the want." His words landed like stones in still water, calm at first, then rippling deeper. Olivia didn't answer. She just looked at the stream, trying to steady this sudden wave of emotion. Ethan's honesty was disarming. He spoke the way few people did, without fear, without games. It wasn't about romance. It was about truth. But that truth made her heart ache in a way she hadn't felt in years. The others soon returned, and the spell broke. The group continued to the waterfall, where laughter and camera clicks filled the air again. But Olivia felt distant, distracted by something invisible, something only she seemed to feel. That evening, back at the cabins, she gathered everyone for the reflection circle, a tradition she held at the end of every excursion. Each student was asked to share one thing they learned, not from the books, but from life itself during the trip. One by one, they spoke about friendship, about nature, about freedom. When it was Ethan's turn, he paused for a long moment before speaking. "I learned," he began, his voice calm but deliberate, "that sometimes people teach us lessons without meaning to. Sometimes they remind us how much more we could be if we stopped letting fear choose for us." The group clapped politely, not realizing the weight behind his words. But Olivia did. She felt it. It was the kind of sentence that stayed with you long after the sound faded. Later that night, after everyone went to sleep, Olivia sat alone by the fire pit, unable to rest. The forest was dark and still. The stars hung low, glittering like secrets. She heard soft footsteps and turned. Ethan was there, holding a flashlight. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "You either—" He smiled. "Not really. I just didn't want the night to end like that." He sat down across from her, and for a moment, neither spoke. The flames flickered between them, lighting half their faces. It felt like time had slowed, just the two of them, surrounded by the hum of nature. "I didn't mean to say too much earlier," Ethan said quietly. "I just meant what I said." "I know," she replied softly, "and I appreciate your honesty. But Ethan, you need to understand there are lines I can't cross." He nodded, looking down. "I know that too. I just wanted you to know that you made me believe in something again. In meaning. In feeling. I hadn't felt that in a long time." Livia's throat tightened. She wanted to say something, but no words came. She wasn't angry, just deeply moved. Here was this young man, not trying to charm her or overstep, but simply sharing what was in his heart. There was purity in that honesty, something unspoken yet powerful. "You've got a good heart," she said finally. "Don't lose that. The world tries hard to take it away." He smiled faintly. "I won't. You made sure of that." They sat quietly after that, watching the fire die into embers. The air between them was full of things unsaid: gratitude, admiration, understanding, all layered in quiet respect. Before heading back, Ethan said one last thing. "Miss Parker, someday, when you look back on this trip, I hope you'll remember that someone saw you. Not as a teacher, just as you." The simplicity of it broke something in her. She wanted to reply, but he was already walking away, flashlight beam cutting through the trees. Olivia stayed there long after he disappeared, the night pressing softly around her. When she finally returned to her cabin, she wrote in her journal again. Sometimes the right words come from the wrong moment, and sometimes they stay with you forever. The next morning, as the group packed up to leave Clearwater Ridge, the mood was light and cheerful. The students chatted about photos, songs, and snacks for the road. But Olivia moved quietly, lost in her own thoughts. On the bus ride home, Ethan sat several rows behind, surrounded by friends. Yet every now and then, she caught him glancing her way. When their eyes met for the last time that trip, he smiled, not as a student, not as someone seeking attention, but as a person saying goodbye to a chapter that mattered. When the bus pulled into the college parking lot, Olivia thanked everyone, collected her notes, and wished them a good break. Ethan lingered until the end. "Goodbye, Miss Parker," he said simply. "Goodbye, Ethan, and good luck with your writing," she replied. He nodded, that familiar spark in his eyes, and walked away into the fading light as the campus grew quiet. Olivia sat in her car, staring out at the students scattering across the lot. She felt something both heavy and freeing, the strange ache of knowing a moment was over, yet knowing it would never really leave you. That night, she placed her notebook on her desk and opened it to a blank page. Then she began to write, not as a teacher, not as a critic, but as a woman finally ready to tell her own story. It wasn't love, not the kind you read about. It was a reminder that life doesn't always give you what you expect. Sometimes it gives you what you need to wake up again. And as she wrote, she realized Ethan's greatest lesson wasn't in his words. It was in how he made her remember that even quiet moments can change everything. 5 years passed since that unforgettable excursion to Clearwater Ridge. Olivia Parker's life had changed in quiet, steady ways. She had moved to a smaller college in Vermont, trading the chaos of large classrooms for peaceful mornings filled with coffee and books. She spent more time writing now essays about life, memory, and the beauty of moments that passed too quickly. Her students admired her calm voice and thoughtful lectures. But sometimes when she walked past the pine trees near the campus, she would still think of that night by the fire of Ethan's words, and how they had awakened something inside her that she didn't know was asleep. She never saw him again after graduation. His name appeared once on a list of writing contest finalists 2 years later, but she hadn't reached out. She didn't know if she should. He had gone his way and she had gone hers, both carrying that quiet chapter in their hearts. Then, one fall morning, a letter arrived. It was handwritten, addressed to her office. The return name read Ethan Cole. Her breath caught for a moment before she opened it. Inside, a short message read, "Ms. Parker, I'm speaking at a local literary event next weekend. My first book is being published, and it wouldn't have existed if it weren't for you. I'd be honored if you came. Ethan." For a long time, she just stared at the letter. A mix of pride, nostalgia, and something deeper stirred in her chest. She thought about ignoring it. Maybe it was better to let memories stay where they belonged. But that night, she found herself searching for his book online. The title was The Quiet Teacher. The next Saturday, she arrived at the bookstore where the event was held. It was small but warm, filled with shelves in soft yellow light. People chatted quietly, holding coffee cups and books. On the small stage, Ethan stood taller and older now, but unmistakably him. His presence still carried that same calm confidence, that quiet depth. When he saw her at the back of the room, his expression froze for just a second, surprise, then warmth. He continued reading, but his voice softened slightly, like the words meant something extra now. After the applause, he signed copies and greeted readers. When she reached the table, he looked up and smiled. "I didn't think you'd actually come." "I almost didn't," Olivia admitted, smiling back. "But then I saw the title." He chuckled. "Yeah, I guess that gave it away." They stood in the corner afterward, talking while people slowly filtered out. He told her about his life, how he'd traveled, written for magazines, struggled through rejections before finally getting his first book deal. She listened, feeling both proud and strangely emotional. "You were right, he said quietly at one point, about timing. Back then, I thought feelings were everything. But now I realize sometimes the right people show up at the wrong time just to teach us something, not to stay forever." Olivia nodded slowly. Yes, sometimes they just remind us of who we are. They went for coffee afterward at a quiet cafe down the street. The rain had started and the world outside looked blurred and soft through the window. Conversation flowed easily between them. Old memories, funny stories, moments of silence that felt comfortable instead of awkward. Ethan spoke about how the book wasn't really about their story, but about what it meant. The power of connection, even fleeting ones, to change lives. "I didn't write about what happened," he said. "Just what it felt like to be seen by someone who didn't even realize how much it mattered." Olivia smiled. "That's what good writing is. You don't tell the story, you let people feel it." He looked at her for a long moment. "That's what you taught me." The way he said it, quiet, sincere, made her heart tighten. There was no tension, no forbidden emotion anymore. Just two people who had once shared something pure and rare, now meeting again as equals. When they said goodbye, he handed her a copy of his book. Inside he had written, "To the teacher who showed me that silence can still speak." As she walked home through the drizzle, Olivia felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not longing, not regret, but a soft gratitude that certain moments, however brief, can last forever in ways you don't expect. That night, she read his book. The story was about a young writer who meets a mentor on a mountain trip. Someone who teaches him that life isn't just about chasing success, but about understanding meaning. The words were beautiful, heartfelt, and full of subtle nods to their shared past. The stream, the fire, the line about the wrong story, but it was all told with grace, without exposing or crossing boundaries. It was art born from emotion, not confession. When she closed the book, she whispered softly, "You did it, Ethan." Months passed, and Olivia found herself writing again, more than she had in years. She started her own blog where she wrote essays about growth, time, and the quiet lessons life gives. Readers from all over the country began following her posts. One day an editor reached out, suggesting she compile them into a book. It felt strange, almost poetic, that Ethan's success had inspired hers in return. A year later, at a book event in Boston, Olivia was invited to speak about mentorship and creative connection. She stood on the stage, scanning the audience. Near the back, she saw a familiar face, Ethan, smiling proudly. During her talk, she said, "Sometimes in life, we meet people who remind us of what we've forgotten, our courage, our dreams, our voice. They might not stay forever, but their echo does." Afterward, Ethan congratulated her. "Guess we came full circle," he said warmly. "Maybe that's how the best stories end," she replied. "Not with drama, but with peace." They stayed in touch after that, occasional messages, emails about writing, sharing drafts and feedback. The bond between them had evolved into something lasting and grounded, built on mutual respect, not the tension of the past. Years later, when Olivia retired from teaching, she received a package in the mail. Inside was a new book by Ethan, Letters from the Ridge. The dedication read, "For Olivia Parker, the woman who taught me to listen to silence and find truth in it." She smiled, tears filling her eyes. It wasn't love in the way most people would think of it. It was deeper and emotional understanding that had shaped both their lives. They had changed each other without breaking each other. That, she realized, was the most beautiful kind of story, one that doesn't need a grand ending to be complete. That evening, she walked outside to her porch, the same way she used 2 years ago, coffee cup in hand. The sun was setting, painting the sky gold and lavender. She opened Ethan's book again, reading the first line aloud. "Some lessons stay long after the classroom is gone." And as the light faded, Olivia smiled, not with sadness, but with gratitude. Life, she thought, had a quiet way of giving back what you give to it. She whispered softly into the breeze, "Thank you, Ethan," as if somewhere he could still hear her dot, and maybe in some small way he did.